nerdlings, and welcome back. In part 1 of viruses, we ended with the lytic cycle, which occurs very quickly and ends in cell death, meaning that the cell is going to lyse open and allow that army of viruses to exit the cell and affect other cells. Today we're going to start off with the second type of viral replication, which is called the lysogenic cycle. The lysogenic cycle is much longer. Just like the word is longer than the lytic cycle, so is the lysogenic cycle itself. So the lysogenic cycle does not destroy the host cell right off the bat. Instead, it's kind of like a sneaky little spy. It actually incorporates itself into the DNA of the cell. So whenever the cell divides, it divides with that virus in it. So it doesn't kill the cell right away. And as that cell divides, it creates more and more and more cells that have that sneaky little spy in them. And it's waiting for the opportunistic time to attack. So just like the lytic cycle, the first two stages are the same. It attaches to a cell and it enters the cell. But once it enters the cell, instead of destroying the DNA or RNA within the cell, it actually incorporates itself into it, meaning that it puts itself into the genetic makeup of the cell itself. So the provirus can be activated by a physical and or emotional stress and eventually enter into the lytic cycle. So right up here, we have the formation of that provirus. The provirus is a viral gene that is integrated into the host cell's DNA, and like I got through saying, every time that host cell divides, so does that viral DNA or RNA. But eventually it's going to enter into the lytic cycle. So first of all, looking at the lysogenic cycle, we have, we have the attachment and entry, and then it gets incorporated into the DNA of the host cell. So this is the viral DNA right here. And as you can see, each time that cell divides, it gets incorporated into more and more and more cells until eventually something triggers it. Now up here, it's talking about something being triggered, or the lysis of the cell or lytic cycle being triggered by an emotional stress or a physical stress. So if you've ever noticed people that get cold sores on their lips, they don't get cold sores unless they're starting to get sick. Those people actually have one of the forms of the herpes virus. Lovely, I know. So if your boyfriend or your girlfriend has a cold sore, you do not want to kiss them because that's actually a herpes outbreak. So when our immune system is not all of the way up to par functional because it's fighting something else, our immune system gets lowered a little bit. When that happens, it's opportune time for that virus to go into the lytic cycle and attack because we're already weakened. That's why people get those cold sores or fever blisters whenever they have a cold or they get the flu or are sick. Same thing with genital herpes. You don't have an outbreak unless your immune system has been weakened by something else. Physical or emotional stress can cause that. If you get hurt, you have a surgery, that makes you a little bit more vulnerable for catching infections, or it makes it more opportunistic for that virus to go into the lytic cycle. Emotional stress as well. If you are getting lack of sleep, you're really stressed, your body is actually releasing different hormones that can affect your immune system when you have a lot of stress in your life or lack of sleep. So that's something that can also cause your virus to go into the lytic cycle. So just to remember, the lytic virus cycle has a very short incubation period. It attacks one cell, it kills that one cell. And an example of lytic viruses are the measles and the flu. The lysogenic virus lasts a lot longer. It infects one cell, but that one cell doesn't die. That one cell starts dividing and incorporating that viral DNA or RNA into its own genetic makeup. And eventually it will go into the lytic cycle. But it takes a long time, and this is a sneaky way for that virus to spread itself throughout the body. Examples of the lysogenic type of virus would be shingles and warts. Retroviruses, for example, are HIV, and those are RNA viruses. So viruses can either have RNA or DNA in their core. And a retrovirus, think of retro, RNA, has RNA in it. And it has to integrate into the host DNA, so they make a DNA copy of their RNA. One of the most common retroviruses that you hear about all the time is HIV, which eventually turns into AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. The very first reported case of this disease was in 1981, my birth year, not something I'm very proud of. So it is a retrovirus, meaning that the genetic material inside that virus is RNA, and it's identified in humans. The RNA core is transcribed into DNA by an enzyme called RNA transcriptase. It is an opportunistic virus, meaning that it doesn't really affect you until you get a secondary infection. It's one of those opportunistic viruses. That's what makes HIV or AIDS so dangerous. The disease itself or the virus itself doesn't kill you. Secondary infections are what actually kills you. So the virus weakens your immune system and makes you susceptible to other diseases and illnesses, such as dementia, that's when you kind of lose it and go crazy, pneumonia, which is when your lungs fill up with fluid and you can't breathe, Kaposi sarcoma, which is a type of cancer, and a lot of other really nasty things that your body would typically be able to fight off. But because the immune system is suppressed, it can no longer fight those different diseases off, and eventually it will lead to your death. So these are a couple common types of viral diseases. We have herpes, and there are many different types of herpes. Like I got through saying earlier, people that have those cold sores, that's actually a type of herpes. And then the one that everybody has always heard about would be genital herpes, which is spread through sexual contact. We have the rabies virus, which attacks the brain, and it's transmitted through the saliva or through a bite or wound. We have the polio virus, which was very prominent, I want to say in the 60s and probably early 70s, and it was a very disfiguring disease that affected a lot of small children. We now have vaccines for the majority of these viruses, so polio has all but been eradicated. We also have vaccines for the measles. We have a vaccine for the mumps, as well as the smallpox. These are more examples of viral diseases, warts, and chickenpox. Now, when I was growing up, they didn't have a vaccine for the chickenpox. So as weird as it may sound, parents used to actually have chickenpox parties. So when one of their kids got sick with the chickenpox, they would bring all of the kids together so they would just all have it at the same time and get it over with. It was one of those, sicknesses that you kind of just got growing up. So when I was probably in about first grade, I got the chickenpox, and I remember it was miserable because your whole body is just itching. And I remember my mom dabbing like this pink stuff called chamomile all over me, and I looked like this really strange spotted pink leopard child. It was very weird. So viral prevention. How do we prevent viruses from attacking us and weakening our immune system? Well, first of all, you guys need to know there is no cure for viral diseases. Viruses are not living, so antibiotics are not going to kill a virus. Antibiotics, bio means life. Anti meaning it's going to destroy or do something about it, without. So it's going to kill something. You can't really kill something that's never been alive. So there are treatments for viruses, though, that help to suppress the virus. They're not going to destroy it, but they might suppress it or prolong it from going into the lytic cycle. So they have different medications. You have a medication called acyclovir right here that helps to suppress herpes. So if you've ever watched commercials on TV, I know it sounds weird, but you see a man and a woman and they're all happy, and then it talks about some wonderful drug, and it talks about, oh, the husband has herpes, and the wife is saying, I'm herpes free. And that's because the person has been taking an antiviral drug that suppresses the virus, so it helps to suppress them from having an outbreak. There are also several drugs that help to suppress HIV from becoming full-blown AIDS. And like I said, eventually HIV will go into the full-blown AIDS stage, but these types of drugs actually help to prolong that experience so the person has a couple extra years. Mostly viruses are prevented by vaccines, just like the flu shot that I got earlier this week. And like I was saying earlier, antibiotics do not work to kill viruses. I would take special note of this because I wouldn't be surprised if your crazy biology teacher asks you a question about antibiotics, viruses, and bacteria. Now remember, bacteria are prokaryotic cells, and cells are alive. So antibiotics can only kill living cells such as bacteria. This is something you might want to jot down into your notebooks, making a table like this. This is comparing a virus to a cell. So here are characteristics. We have our virus, and for structure, the virus is composed of either DNA or RNA, and it has a capsid, which is a protein coat. Now cells have a plasma membrane and they have cytosol. Eukaryotic cells in particular have a nucleus as well as membrane-bound organelles like Golgi bodies, the endoplasmic reticulum, chloroplasts in plant cells, mitochondria, all of those different types of organelles that help to function in the cell. For reproduction, viruses, they don't reproduce, period. They replicate, and they can only replicate within a host cell. Cells can independently divide, and they can reproduce either sexually or asexually. As far as genetic code goes, viruses can have DNA or RNA, whereas cells' genetic code is always going to be found in the form of DNA. As far as growth and development, viruses have none. They do not grow and they do not develop, whereas cells do grow and develop. Obtain and use energy. Viruses do not obtain energy, nor do they use it. Cells, however, do obtain energy, and they do use it. Now, plant cells will obtain energy from the sunlight, as well as nutrients that they gather in the soil, while eukaryotic cells obtain nutrients by the process of taking in nutrients that maybe plant cells have actually broken down for them in the form of glucose, or have formed for them in the form of glucose, I should say. And then change over time. Viruses actually do evolve. That's why I have to get a flu shot every year, because every year the flu virus actually mutates into a different strand that can infect you. So scientists pretty much take their best guess as far as what that flu strain is going to mutate in each year, and they make a vaccine based on what their prediction of how it's going to mutate is. And typically they do a pretty good job of that. The cells also change and evolve over time. Well, that concludes our lecture over viruses. I hope you guys got some good information, and I will see you soon. Bye.